There's been quite a lot of attention given this morning already and in the press to the situation between Calais and Dover, the narrow straits crossing, but less attention, I think, to what's happening between Ireland and Wales, essentially, which is what I'd like to ask you about. You know, God knows there are sufficient complications between Northern Ireland and the Republic, so I don't want to go into any of that, especially as we don't have anyone from Northern Ireland here, as we usually have. So I'd just like to talk about perishable foods. I did meet some food producers from Northern Ireland a few months ago in a meeting organised by the then Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, and asked them a few questions about the trade north-south and particularly west-east. And again, I think that they were quite concerned that insufficient attention had been given to this. So just firstly, you know, there's a lot of sort of primary products, chicken or whatever, and also manufactured meals and that sort of thing, which are very time sensitive, which go north-south. So what's your understanding as far as the Republic is concerned as to the checks that they will impose and whatever else? Is it going to be as with Calais? I mean, there's been a great deal of talk about not having any physical infrastructure on the border itself. So how do you understand that trade will be affected if we leave with no deal?
Shall I start?
Yeah.
So the Dublin Holyhead route was probably next on my list in terms of priority after Dover Calais, because it's the next busiest route. It's 20 crossings a day as opposed to about 60 for Dover Calais, and as you say, it's a huge source of all sorts of goods, but a lot of food goods. And very time sensitive to the shops opening and getting goods in. So exactly the same situation will apply between Dover and Holyhead as between Holyhead and Dublin as between Dover and Calais. I.e., the Irish will have to do customs checks and SBS checks on goods entering Dublin from Holyhead. And at Holyhead, again, just as in Dover, the UK is not going to put any controls and checks in the way of goods coming from Dublin. On the plus side, associated with that, because of the fewer frequency, because it's only 20 crossings as opposed to 60 crossings a day, our estimate was, while there would likely be delays because of the time taken for checks happening in Dublin, they would all be constrained within a day. So you wouldn't get queues building up over days as you would in Dover and Kent. So the impact on the delays will not be, necessarily 12 plus hours. But as you say, some of those delays are very time sensitive, and if they miss the 2 o'clock ferry, they don't hit the 5 o'clock deadline for getting into the shops. So those sensitivities are there, and there were concerns about that. I know there were concerns as we talked to Northern Ireland stakeholders that if there were likely to be delays on that route, then would traders choose to go through the border, which would not have any delays, at least on our side of the border, because the UK government was not going to put any controls and checks on any of the goods going across the land border. But of course then they would need to go across the land border and to the Northern Ireland, the northern port, into Larne, into Scotland, and that's a much longer route.
Other way.
Yeah, so the assessment was probably that not a lot would choose to reroute through the land border because it would be more difficult to do that. But there was another attraction, of course, through that route, which is that you get no tariffs and no customs through that route. So there could well be some trade disruption and some different flows of trade which would have impacts. But Andrew's probably better placed to say what the industry view.
Yeah, it's a big problem. A number of UK retailers operate stores in the Republic, and actually accounts for quite a large percentage of their grocery market. Lots of that food is shipped from GB over to Ireland through Dublin, and it's really kind of highlights the problems of becoming a third country and then trying to export into the EU. The food export rules into the EU are not set up for retail just-in-time deliveries. They are really set up for a large consignment of New Zealand lamb coming over, the same kind of product. It's relatively easy to have one export health certificate. A retailer will be sending over maybe 200, 300 different products. A large proportion of those will have products of animal origin, so that's either meat or that's meat products that have been manufactured here in GB and shipped over. Each of those needs its own export health certificate, which needs to be signed off by a vet. So the lorry has to carry multiple certificates with it to do that. Any mistakes, obviously the lorry is then held and the appropriate paperwork needs to be sent. So the system of trying for a retailer to try and work through all of that system and send the same supply that we are currently sending is nigh on impossible, just from the bureaucracy and the administration of trying to get through all of the rules that you need to do to send that vehicle across, because the Irish have told us that they will administer all of the rules in Dublin, including the pallets that we talked about earlier. They are saying, this is the border with the EU, you need to send stuff over, but it will have a significant impact on GB retailers or UK retailers trying to send product to their Republic of Ireland stores.
I think that's an excellent summary, and I certainly agree.
I mean, mindful of the previous answers that you gave on preparedness, is there the same degree of preparedness as far as Dublin Holyhead is concerned, as far as compared with Calais?
We were probably less close to Dublin's arrangements than we were to Calais and Eurotunnel's arrangements. We have very close relationships with the French, who worked very closely with us. Obviously, they were constrained by what they could do and say by the EU, but nevertheless, we got quite familiar with it. We have not been able to get as close to Irish arrangements because Ireland has been less willing to talk to UK about border arrangements. So I would have less confidence in them, but that's not to say that they are not prepared. But I could see that the French were very well prepared, and that's why I've probably just got less confidence because I've less cited on them. But we worked on the assumption that they would be able to, cope as well as the French with their arrangements. There would probably be more teething problems there. So they're used to operating systems. It's just not at Dublin. But yeah.